winter is upon us. It's actually late autumn, but, you know, late autumn is upon us. Doesn't have the literary ring that I'm looking for in my content, so we'll stick with winter, because when this video comes out, it will be winter anyway. So the point is, I'm cold, and the other point is, I've got a lot of KiwiCo maker crates sitting in my house that I didn't get round to doing last year when I was subscribed. I have paused that subscription while I catch up. So in the meantime, I want to get through that backlog, and because I'm cold, I thought I'd start with loom knitted hats. There we go. I got that the right way up, I think. Yes, well done me. So basically it is loom knitting with a loom, with a knitting loom, and I will end up with a hat. And I don't normally wear this style of kind of beanie hat because I worry that it makes my head look too small in proportion to my body. And I'm aware that if I wear one in the street, people aren't going to be walking around going, tiny head. But, you know, just in case, I worry about these things. But we'll see if this is the beanie hat that I can wear without those concerns. And if not, kicking around at home would be fine with a nice warm head. So I'm going to go and open this box to show you all this stuff that's inside it. And then I'm going to start loom knitting my hat. As usual, my backdrop needs ironing, and as usual, I haven't done that. So we'll just pretend that I have, and we'll take this sleeve off in a smooth, there we go. So smooth, there we go. And then we get the crate itself, which is in shot. Well done me. So let's see what's in here. We've got the cover sheet that basically says this is what you're making, but it is pretty much what this was as well. So it's not a surprise, but there's the cover sheet. We've got the maker guide and inspiration, which should have some ideas of what to do with my new looms. Just let me, there we go. Some ideas. And we've got the yarn and the looms and some pom-poms. So for this yarn, or for this crate is what I meant to say, we've got a wool blend yarn, which is 20% wool and 80% acrylic. And we've got that in this sort of flecked grey and a blue, sort of a dark teal maybe, tealy blue. So I'll put them to one side. And then we've got some smaller yarns here, which are also 20% wool, 80% acrylic, getting them in shot. My viewfinder's upside down. I'm having a wonderful time with my neural pathways. There we go. So those are for sort of highlight colours and also apparently for making the pom-pom, because I have had a cheeky sneaky look at the instructions. We've also got 3 fake fur pom-poms or tribbles. I'm worried that I might end up with quite a lot of these, but that's those. I don't know that I love fake fur pom-poms. Oh, that one's gone anyway. I knew they were alive. Okay, I'll get that one later because that's a worry. We've got a little bag of tools, toolkit, which includes, just let me open that. You enjoy this view while I open that. So that includes sewing needles, which that's the back. That was very helpful to show you. There we go. And there's the front that actually shows you the needles. I've got some marking markers. That's the word. Marking markers, which you can't really see because it's sort of on the background there. And that I can mark different pegs around the loom so that I know when I'm doing a different stitch if I decide to do that, which I may or may not. Sewing thread, not very interesting, not in shot, there we go. My hook tool for moving the yarn around on the loom. Stop me if I get technical. But basically that's what I will use to move the loops on the pegs. Does that make sense? So move that, yeah, okay. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. I've also got a pom-pom winder, which I've never used one like this before. I always use the two cardboard circles. Not that I very often make pom-poms, but I could if I wanted to. And a plastic needle, which I probably won't be using. And a small packet of silica gel, which is not relevant, but I thought you should know it was in there. And of course the 2 looms. So I'm going to get the box out of shot, so that, because this is yellow on yellow, I didn't think about that. So let's get that out of shot a bit. Let's get that a bit out of shot. And maybe we'll put this down so that you can see the yellow loom. So 2 different sizes, small and large, or medium and large, I don't know. So the way to test to see which size to use is to try and slide it over your head. So I'm just going to optimistically go with the small. That's disappointing, I need to use the large. I think I need to use the large. I will measure my head properly, but the small is a little tight. But that is what, I mean, this is not a gauge for how tight your hat will be, but it needs to apparently slide down over your forehead without any problems. And that got stuck, and I don't want to talk about it. So I'm going to go and re-watch the instructions, have a practice, and then see what I can do with my looms. I started by putting the markers on every fourth peg so that I knew where to do my purl stitch, because the pattern that I chose was 3 knit, 1 purl, and that's just popping on the markers. I didn't record the whole process because, you know, 10 hours or so. We all have places to be. Nobody's got time for that. And this is casting on, which is quite simple and quite straightforward. They do say not to let go of your yarn until you've worked your first stitch, and they mean it. I did a practice round and let go of the yarn about 6 times, which was a lot of fun for me. I've got footage of that, but I'm not showing you because I want to remain professional. And this is about an hour's worth of knitting for the first few rows, which was just under an inch. I did speed up a little bit over time, but that was my gauge for an hour. And this is the whole hat on the loom. And this is casting off the hat. See, I told you I was doing edited highlights. So yeah, just running a thread, running the yarn through itself, basically through each loop, and lifting each loop off the peg. And then, once you've got your tube, such as this, the time has come to cinch the top, which you do just by pulling the yarn. And it takes a little bit of jiggling around to get it into place and to get that to close up properly. And I did end up using the needle to sew over that top hole a little bit just to get it nice and closed. And then it's pom-pom time. I went with both pom-pom colours on my pom-pom, which was really quick to do. And this is just some quite badly shot footage of winding that on, tying it off in the middle so that it will not fall apart when I cut it. And then sliding it off the little pom-pom tool. Eventually, come on, get a wriggle on, places to be, there we go. And then cutting through it to make the actual pom-pom shape. And then I just attached that to the top of the hat with the long strands. You can just see them there. I'd sewn them in and then just pull it tight so that the pom-pom sits nicely on top of the hat. And then you can just about see what I'm doing there. It's a very good camera angle, tying it off inside so that the pom-pom will stay put. And that's the finished hat. I don't think it's going to rain, but I have been wrong about that before. The main thing, you know, is I've got a hat. I made a hat. Can you see my hat? I hope you can. I hope I'm in shot, because I can't tell. Oh, I am sort of in shot. There we go. My viewfinder's there. It needs to be over there. Anyway, I'm going to take this hat off because we're going to talk about it. So, here's my hat. It's about 9.5 inches long, so it took maybe 10, maybe 11 hours. I was getting just under an inch an hour to start with, but I do think I sped up, but I didn't sort of time myself to see if I had. I just assumed I had. The pattern that I went with was based on this one on the front cover of the Maker Guide, which is 2 knit, 2 purl, and I liked that ribbed look, but I didn't like how wide the purl stitches, which are the sort of the valleys, I suppose. I didn't like how wide that was, so I went with 3 knit, 1 purl, and that has given the texture without it being too wide. Was it fun to do? Yeah. I'll tell you what the best part was for me. No counting. You don't have to do any counting if you're just doing a plain knit like this, because you've got your markers on all the pegs to let you know when you need to do a different stitch. So I had a marker on each peg where I had to do a purl stitch. So as I went round, I'd just go, oh, time for a purl. I didn't say that out loud. That would have been weird. So no counting. So you can put it down and go and make a cup of tea, walk the dog, go to work, whatever. And when you pick it up again, you know exactly where you are in the pattern and what your next stitch has to be without counting back or trying to figure out where you are. I will also say that this pom-pom technique is amazing. I don't make a lot of pom-poms. I don't have a lot of use for pom-poms in my day-to-day life, but this took me a minute. And it's not as, you know, compact or rounded as one that you would get out of a cardboard circle, but it is a pom-pom, and it does function as a pom-pom insofar as pom-poms function. I've said pom-pom too many times. Way too many times. Now, I did ignore their instructions for colour changes because, as you can see, I've done a little bit of colour work down there just to be fancy. The instructions that they have in the crate are to do the magic knot, which is not something I have a problem with. I love the magic knot. I use it a lot. You know, my magic ball projects, if you've been around the channel or if you've seen them before, all held together with magic knots. But it is quite tricky with a project like this to get the colour change exactly where you want it if you're using a magic knot. because you have to work the yarn to the point where you want the colour change, then unwork it, which in this case would mean putting all the loops back on the loom, mark it, you know, tie it off and all the rest of it. So I found a tutorial online on YouTube, in fact, right here on YouTube, for a good colour change method which I used, which worked really well. So I'll put a link in the description to that if you're curious, and you might be, I don't know. Now, the yarns that came with the crate are not the highest quality yarns. Wouldn't expect them to be. That's not a criticism. They are fine. The grey in particular is actually quite nice. It's a little bit squishy. It's got that fleck through it, and it's a little bit grippier. I'll show you the blue because I had some problems with the blue. If you're new to the channel, I keep everything sort of down here. I'll be back. So this is the blue that came with the kit, obviously. That's what we're talking about. And I don't know if you can see, but it's a little bit shiny because it's a little bit slippery. And I had a lot of trouble with it, actually, learning the stitches with it, because it's really, really easy when you're trying to take one loop off the peg for both loops to fall off the peg, because this has just got very, very little grip. And there's also some manufacturer's knots in it, but that might just be my batch. I don't know that that's a consistent issue. The grey is a little bit grippier. It's not as shiny. It's not as smooth. It's got just a little bit more bite to it. That's not the actual phrasing that I mean, but you know what I mean. So it was a much... I've turned this into a glove puppet character now. So it was much easier to keep the loops that needed to stay on the peg and get rid of the ones that didn't. So I would, if you get this crate, I'm going to suggest that you go with the grey, because the blue is a beautiful blue. It's just a little harder to work with. I was just trying to figure out what to do with my hat while I talk about the Maker's Guide, and I just realised I could probably just do that, really, couldn't I? Just pop it on my head. So here's the Maker's Guide that comes with the project. The instructions for the Maker's Crate are all video, which is good, and also I have an issue with it, but I'll get to that in a second. So the Maker's Guide basically just tells you what's in there, gives you, it's very crumpled, and that's because my dog sat on it. Gives you some ideas for other projects you can do with the loom. Gives you a few more stitch patterns, which I'd like to have a play with, but these involve more counting than I was willing to do for my first project. And it also tells you what size yarn to buy, which I really like, because Maker Crates are designed for you to get interested or try a new creative hobby, and they give you the tools to do that. And in this case, they're saying, if you enjoyed this and would like to keep going, here's the materials you need to buy to keep going. Now, I know yarn. I handle yarn a lot. I can handle my yarn. But for somebody who's brand new to yarn crafts, or who's done very little in the way of yarn crafts, they might not know what weight yarn this is. And so they've helpfully said, go to the shop and look for this on the label. Doesn't really apply to Australia because we don't do that, but it's helpful anyway. And then there's a bit of a history of knitting. This really is crumpled. My dog has sat on this hard. Now, what I would say is the video instructions are, I understand why they're there. They're less expensive to produce than loads and loads of detailed booklets. They don't add anything to the postage cost to get the crates out to people, because the booklets can be quite heavy. And they are really well done. I mean, they're well done tutorials that show you exactly what you need to do and how it all works. So I've got no sort of issues with the quality of the videos, but what I would like is on the back of the Maker Guide, where they have their sort of featured projects, I would love a cheat sheet. And not so much with this one perhaps, but with the previous Maker Crates that I've done. There's been sort of key information that I've had to scrub through the video to try and find, to remind myself what I needed to do, or what, you know, they'd sort of say, this is important, don't forget. And then I'd be sitting there thinking, I have forgotten. So it'd be nice to have the important information, like the really key points, just in a bullet form on the back of the Maker's Guide, so that you can quickly refer to it and go, oh, that's right, instead of sitting there trying to scrub through a video and trying to find the exact right point for the instructions that you need. But that is kind of a tiny quibble, because it does all work. I had a really good time doing this. I will be doing it again. As I said, I'd like to try some of the fancier stitches when I have the brain capacity to do counting. So the last thing I have to say, not in general, just about this, is that I went up to the larger size. I didn't really need to. The blue loom is for measurements around the head up to 65 centimetres, and the yellow loom, which is what I was using, was for 65 centimetres plus. I measured in at about 63.5 centimetres, and I thought, as with all my clothes, I'll go up rather than down, or rather than bang on. So I could have gone the size smaller and it probably would have fit, but it wouldn't have been as comfy, and I would have felt like I had a really tiny head in proportion to my body. All right, that's all I have to say about this. Thank you so much for watching me play with the KiwiCo Loom knitted hats. I have a backlog of KiwiCo crates, although it's slightly smaller now because I made a hat. I will see what I can dig out to do for the next one of these videos. And in the meantime, you take care of yourself and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.